This is White Lime from Deuces Cracked,
And Phil Galfon from Blue Fire Poker.
and this is episode 2 of our collaborative series, PLO.
In today's episode, we are going to go through just a select few hands from a session that Emil played earlier, and just look at them one at a time. And I'll be asking him questions about what he was thinking. He'll be asking me questions about really any questions he has about the hand, and hopefully, we hope to address some situations that no limit players transitioning to PLO find themselves in and trying to navigate their way out of.
Yeah, one of the things that we're looking for when we picked out these hands is to focus on some of the things that I mentioned at the beginning of episode 1, which I wanted to work with, which were, and I'm going to go through these really quickly, c-betting too much, pushing pre-flop edges too much, my bet sizing, and not really slow playing enough. So with that said, you want to get it right into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so right here, I have ace 9 7 6 suited to the ace on the button. I'm pretty much almost always going to play this hand unless it goes raise, re-raise in front of me.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great hand. I mean, against like a weaker player, I'd consider re-raising on the button. Even in this spot, it wouldn't be that bad. Just 'cause it's a pretty decent hand, and obviously we've talked about a lot how position's so powerful.
Right, I'd probably end up re-raising this a good amount too, but the guy that opened has not opened a hand in 25 hands,
Yeah.
and he's only played one. And I mean, we flop top pair, gut shot, backdoor, nut flush draw. I guess another backdoor straight draw also.
hmm
I mean, I see no point to raising here. We have a draw and a backdoor draw, which is going to be more powerful if other people call. So, I mean, this seems like a pretty straightforward call, I guess.
I think in a heads-up pot, I would call 100%. Three-way pot, I'd probably call. In a four-way pot, I think you can start to consider folding, given that he potted it in three people, so his range is very strong. And then you do have to worry about the people behind you a little bit. Did you think? I guess Ace Rag hasn't opened that many hands. Are you worried at all that he's like slow playing? I guess it's pretty unlikely. It'd be a pretty unlikely parlay of events that he has the case two aces and decided to check. So I guess you're not too worried about getting raised here. And somebody else coming along isn't really that bad if they call.
Right, that was pretty much what I was thinking. I mean, I have one ace in my hand, and he did check. I mean,
Mhm.
I really don't expect to get check raise here very often at all.
Another good thing about having like your backdoor straight draw with this is that a lot of turns you'll hit two pair and an open ender, which is a pretty strong hand that you can get it in with.
All right, so three-handed to the turn, and we now have another gut shot, although not to the nuts, but it's pretty unlikely that the 10 is going to make someone a better straight here.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so he bets. What kind of range are you giving him here?
I mean, this guy is pretty passive. I think he's pretty much almost always going to show up with a strong made hand. I mean, I would say a 4-4, 8-8, ace jack.
Probably if ace jack, some other, because I
Right.
know a lot of ace jack randoms bet the flop with a guy that's passive.
Ace jack would probably be something like
Ace jack
ace jack 8, ace
yeah.
jack 4, something like that, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree. So really, it comes down to kind of equity, immediate odds, implied odds. You could also think about John coming along, which would help your case. So I think that, trying to think against a set, I would guess your equity is maybe 28-ish% in that range, to where I can't imagine that you don't have enough implied odds to call. Like he might not. All your draws are pretty disguised, besides the 5. The 5 is kind of a scare card, but a 10 shouldn't look that scary to him, given it's a backdoor draw. And same, your diamonds might, but again, he might pay you off just because it's a river that if you had a wrap, you'd probably bluff diamonds, or he might expect you to. So I think you do have decent implied odds here. Plus, John coming along. I would
Right.
I would make the call.
Right. I think I end up calling here. And after the hand initially played out, I feel like my call was just a little too loose and I was spewing a little bit. But I mean, thinking about it a little more, I feel like, I mean, I think one of the things I might have thought about at the time was that the 10 does not make me the nuts.
Right.
But I mean, that isn't really that big of a concern just because,
Yeah, he'd have to have ace, queen, 10, jack, and have not re-raised pre-flop, and have bet the flop, which he might not bet the flop with a hand like that. Or like queen 10, 8, 8, or something like that. I agree that he's very, very strong here, but that's actually good for you. I mean, us having the ace is inconsequential, except that it gives us the nut flush draw, because our two pairs not even going to be good if we hit.
do you think it's close enough where if the jack of diamonds was the queen of diamonds, it probably turns it into a fold?
Yeah, I actually do think it's that close. I think I would fold with on a queen of diamonds turn
Okay.
against somebody that you think is going to be not light there. If somebody can be light there or have like a 5, 6, 7, 8, or even like an ace 4, you have good equity against. If somebody's going to be that light, then you got to play it through. At least call, maybe shove, and hope they fold a hand like ace 4. Or you get it in good against a wrap. But given that this guy's got passive stats, he bet into 4 people. I think that on a queen of diamonds, I'd fold. So the river's a deuce, and he checks. Did you consider bluffing?
Um, I, I don't think so. I mean, we have an ace in our hand right here.
Mm.
This guy is really passive, and he potted the flop and potted the turn. So I'm really, really, really inclined to think that he's got like a strong made hand here, and I just can't see him bluffing on that card when really only one draw gets there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unlikely draw that I don't think he'd want to put you on. I just wonder, yeah, I wonder if he can have like a weakish hand to check here, like an ace 8 that was just betting to protect. I find like sometimes passive players, even though that seems like a really spewy play, they're just like, well, I had 2 pair, I still have 2 pair, I need to protect it against a draw, and then check. But even then, he could call with ace 8, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's folding ace 8 if he played ace 8 like this. Even if I didn't have any showdown value here, I think I would just still check and lose the hand.
Yeah. So yeah, he ended up having a set, and I think it was a good check behind. And I think that hand was perfectly played. No complaints there for sure.
Cool. All right, so right here I'm dealt ace 10, 9, 8 double suited under the gun. Pretty strong hand. Very standard open here.
Yeah, it's definitely a monster, and um, I know we were talking in the last video about people not four betting enough. If you had somebody who's 3 betting light, this is like a pretty decent hand to 4 bet bluff with. Basically, I take all my like good double suited hands to 4 bet with, and I mean it's like obviously not a total bluff, it's semi bluff, I guess, because we're calling. But it's good because you have to do it with some, and if you do run into aces, you're not in terrible shape. I prefer not to have an ace in my hand. But anyways, we get to the flop and check to us. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I guess I could check here, but my initial instinct would be to just bet because the pot is three-handed here. And if I get raised by someone, I mean, it seems like a pretty easy fold, although not too happy about it just because we have top pair, top kicker, and a gut shot.
Yeah, it is frustrating because you do have to fold to a bet for sure, but it is annoying that even against a hand like like ace king, or let's say king queen 10 6, you're not in bad shape at all. You have your 3 overs to his 2 pair, and your gutter. And you do get raised by some wraps or like wrap plus flush draw kind of hands, or 10 plus flush draw, although it's not a disaster to fold against them. But I wanted to talk about this because this is one spot where I think a lot of no limit players think, oh, okay, well, Phil's saying I should check more. Maybe this is a good spot to check because I can't stand a raise. I have a pretty good hand. Maybe this equates to like mid pair in no limit hold'em. But it's different in this spot. This is a bad spot to check because of the turns that can hit. When you want to check a flop, you got to think about what kind of turns you can continue with the hand on. And this is a spot where there are almost no turns that are good for us. There's an ace, there's a 7, and then pretty much everything else isn't that good. Like if we turn 2 pair with a 9, there's a straight out there, plus a lot of, there's a 9 of hearts that could hit, that would give us 2 pair. Obviously, that's not that good. So I think that I just want to bet here. I'm fine getting them to fold, getting no action, and just taking down the pot. If we do get raised, we have to fold, but whatever.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense here. I mean, I guess pretty much offsuit ace and offsuit 7 are the only cards we want to see here.
Yeah. And like so, if we did check call twin, then like we're out of position on every turn, and they're all ugly. And if he 2 barrels, we have to fold pretty much all of them. So here you
Right.
turn double gutter with your pair. So the pot's like almost 400. We have just over 2 times pot. The queen's good in that a lot of your opponent's hands now have to fold, but we don't really have that strong of a hand against any hand that gets it in with us. If they get it in, our 2 pair outs probably are no good. Maybe the ace, like queen 10 type hand. Occasionally somebody slow played a set or like waited to see a good turn or like has a set of queens. So I think I'd probably check here, and if twin bets, it's a really ugly spot because I hate to fold a hand with this many outs, but I might have to.
Right. I mean, looking at this some more, I feel like betting is probably good just because Keepa is, I feel like very likely to have a draw here.
Yeah,
That queen, that offsuit queen is not that likely to really have improved anyone's hands there. I mean, it doesn't really connect with any of the draws on the flop.
yeah. I mean, you do get folds a decent amount, but I don't know if it's enough. And also, you do have a double gutter and a pair, but you're not good against anything that gets it in. I mean, even if Keepa just has like, if he has king queen of hearts and 2 random cards, now you're in pretty bad shape against him. You have, I don't know, 8 outs, something like that. Maybe 10, depending on what his cards are. But anyways, it's just like if there's a pot size bet left, I would shove, and if you were a lot deeper, you could bet fold to like apply pressure to people. But in this spot, I think you were right to check. Okay, so you hit third nuts.
Right.
Um, so it's interesting. Usually, third nuts is not a super strong hand in PLO, but in this spot, I think that given the flop texture, there aren't going to be a lot of ace kings out there, and not a lot of king nines. Obviously, they exist if somebody has like whatever ace king 10-5, but it's unlikely. And I think a lot of times you're not going to be beat that often, and I'm not even sure you can fold to a bet. And I'm not sure people are bluffing all that often. I think you do run into 8-9 a lot with like a 7-8-9, so you're chopping. But I would just put in a smallish, medium-sized value bet here. Hope somebody just does something stupid, or hope somebody has pocket jacks and just ran into a set, something like that.
Right. I mean, looking at this some more, I feel like my check is just terrible. I don't really understand what I was thinking.
Yeah, and it's like one of those spots where I don't think you're going to get paid off all that much, but you're going to make more than you're going to make by checking, for sure. I don't think it's a spot where twin's going to bluff into 2 people, given the way the board ran out and what kind of hands he could have.
Right. All right. I know at the beginning of episode 1 of this series, I talked about pushing preflop edges too much as one of my leaks, and I think this hand is going to turn out to be a pretty good example of that.
Yeah, I'd imagine it is.
So, I mean, the first thing I guess I looked at here was that the preflop raiser looks to be like a very loose, aggressive player,
Mhm.
and there are a bunch of callers, on one of whom is also incredibly loose. So,
Right.
seemed like a good spot to push this. And I've run a bunch of equity sims with kings, mostly in heads-up pots, but I've also run a few multi-way, and pretty much as long as no one has aces, you're almost always going to have the best of it.
Okay, I mean, first I want to say I'd never ever do this, but I do see what you're saying. I understand your logic. It's at 5-10 mostly. If somebody has aces, one of these three guys are going to be three betting because not many people cold call with aces, especially after there's already a caller. They don't smooth call over that. And since this guy's opening almost half his hands, it's very unlikely he has aces. So there's like a very, very good chance kings is the best hand pre-flop. But uh, even given that, if you get called here in more than two spots, which is very likely going to happen, um, it just plays so badly in a multi-way pot. Like if you have double suited kings here, that plays really well multi-way. But kings this raggedy, really, even in a heads-up pot, even if they are ahead pre-flop, like, and you're pushing your pre-flop equity, there's not a flop that you can hit that you're really excited about. So unless you're hitting a king or a couple hearts, even with a couple hearts, it's not that great because you get flush over flush or flush drawed over flush drawed, if that's how you say that. But I just can't envision many flops that are going to be good for you. And what I picture happening is you getting a few callers, you shoving any ace high flop or non ace high flop, and you getting it in with like 25% equity or 20% equity, like a good amount of the time, and almost never getting it in really good. So I think that this is one of those spots where people overvalue kings. Even aces in this spot. If you had ace ace deuce three with three high suit, I would not three bet that hand. Even though obviously we clearly have the best hand pre-flop, it just doesn't play well, and we're too deep.
All right, so let's see what ends up happening here. All right, so he goes into the tank, calls. Twin calls behind him. And I can't see this guy folding.
Yeah. All right, so you have a four-way pot. And you flop an overpair. Bottom pair actually doesn't really help you. No backdoor flush draw. And like, I don't know, 1.5 times pot with pre-flop razor and just over pot with the other two. And I agree that having gotten to this spot, I would shove. But it's just such an ugly spot, and this is what's going to happen the overwhelming majority of the time. You're going to get a flop like this, and it's going to be really tough to get it in good, pretty much ever. Or to get everybody to fold, just because it's so draw heavy.
Right. And I mean, I guess I thought about the flop a little bit, and it's probably pretty close. If like the three was
Wow.
some coordinated card, like an 8 or a 9,
Right.
it might just be a check fold, right?
And okay, so you had a wrap, big wrap. Yeah, I don't even think you're ahead of that hand. I'm not positive. Yeah, if like there are some flops you can fold, the coordinated ones, and ace high flops. It's unfortunate though that you have to check fold ace high flops because those are the flops that you can bluff the best. Because people put you on aces pretty much always there. So I guess the point is, even if you are getting your money in good pre-flop, it's just like for the same reason that you don't three bet ace seven offsuit, even though you usually have the best hand, and even often have the best hand when called. It's just going to play so badly on a lot of flops that it's just better to call and hope to hit a set and play fit or fold, basically.
Right. You would still play that hand pre-flop, though, right?
Yeah, I
Probably
would
just
call
call,
it. I
more or
pretty
less
much
set mine.
I almost never fold kings unless I think there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to get three bet behind me. But for one bet, playing big pairs is really good because you set over set people.
Right. All right, so right here we have a poster, and I pick up single suited king king 7-3 under the gun, and I raise it, and I don't really think I would limp this hand ever with the poster there.
Yeah, I think that kings like crappy kings like this are a pretty good hand to limp in general, just because it plays well that way, only getting the flop for one bet and keeping the pot small and see if you can hit a set, basically. But I either like to raise all my hands from under the gun or limp like a pretty wide range, including these, because usually when people limp under the gun, they have a pocket pair like this, and I don't like to be easily put on that.
Right.
Anyways, but raising's fine for sure. You get three bet here, and it looks like this player's 61-12, so probably not three betting super light. And I think in this spot, I'm assuming you probably fold.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the particular spot, but I'm pretty sure I folded here, just being out of position against someone who's, I mean, pretty likely to have aces here because he's probably not going to be three betting too light. I mean, this hand just doesn't seem to be very strong out of position here.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And the thing I wanted to point out here, um, even if this is a different player type, and let's say it's somebody who is capable of three betting pretty light, or three bets light a lot, you still can't play kings here because all the times you have the best hand and you don't flop a king or two clubs, you're going to fold the best hand on the flop. So if he has aces half the time and even a random hand the other half, you're just going to get owned on the flop being out of position because you just don't connect with many flops with a hand like this. And you can't check shove that often because you run into aces so often. Or if he doesn't have aces, you run into two pair, a flop draw, or something that you're never in great shape. So you definitely have to fold this hand, even against somebody who's not just re-raising aces.
Right. All right, so right here on table one, I have 3, 5, 6, 7, and looks
Yeah.
like Bling Blong opens and gets 3 bet by JCAA.
hmm
And I think I end up cold calling here. My reasoning being that JCAA just seems like a maniac here.
Yeah. I think that him being a maniac is more of an argument against cold calling because if you could, let's say, put somebody on only ace ace in this spot, I could see an argument for calling because you know his hand. You have a hand that plays decent against that hand, and you have the ability to like take him off his hand on certain flops that you don't hit and get value from him usually when you do because he's just going to pot call most flops. Um, the thing about a hand like this is it's not as good as it looks. Like if we move all the cards up four, so that you have like a 7, 9, 10 jack, um, that's a really strong hand. But with the cards being this low, all the flops where you hit two pair or even like trips, the value is going to go way down. And also, a lot of your straights are going to be the lower end of straights, and your flush is going to be a low flush. So I would just fold here pre-flop. Another big thing to consider is that uh, Bling Blong is going to call, and you're 3K deep with him. And what's going to happen on a lot of flops is there's going to be 300 in the pot. You're going to check. Bling Blong is going to check. JC is going to pot for 300, and you're going to have to make a decision. And let's say it's marginal, where you put JC all in, and then Bling Blong wakes up with a huge hand, and you get stacked for 3K, or have to fold your hand after putting like 1200 in or something like that. I guess not 1200, like 900. So, given like stack size situation and that this isn't really as strong a hand as it looks, I think this is a bad call pre-flop. But I understand why you make it, and it's kind of like tough to avoid because you learn that like these wrap type hands are all powerful, and they are when you run sims against like aces pre-flop. Like it doesn't play that badly, but that doesn't mean that 100 deep or 300 big blinds deep out of position it's going to work out.
Right. I think the preflop raiser being 300 big blinds deep along with me was
Mm-hmm.
definitely one of the reasons that I thought that cold calling the re-raise would be better. But I mean, I guess
Right.
what you talked about, him having position on me is probably gonna make it even worse that we're deep with
Yeah,
him.
it makes it worse because not only does he have position, but he also has the relative position to the three better, who's going to be getting in on a lot of flops. So you're going to be facing a big bet usually before Bling Blong is, though he just led into him here. And I know we were talking about this spot, um, about like when if we did have certain hands here, how would we play them? And I think it's pretty tricky. Um, I guess um, JC ended up folding, right?
Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
just both fold.
yeah. And uh, you were asking what kind of hands I would check raise here. And the truth is, I pretty much wouldn't check raise any hands here because I would the way I would play all of my hands that I wanted to continue with was I would lead into bling blong with them, so that I don't get put in the situation where he checks, JC bets, and I have to make a decision before him. I put him in the decision. So let's say I have um, King Jack Jack 9. I'd lead for whatever 240. And then he would have to make a decision now, like, is he going to call? Is he going to raise? Will he call and then JC shoves and I reshove and he has to be in a tough spot? So that's how I'd play all my hands, and I'd balance it with draws and with my huge hands too. But pretty much after checking, I'm pretty rarely making a play uh, at this board with a good hand or without a hand.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That's definitely something I haven't thought of before, but that makes a lot of sense too.
It's like, yeah, putting people in between you and somebody who's about to go all in is a really useful tool in PLO, especially like when you're both deeper than the person who's about to go all in, because then they kind of have to make a decision, and then you get the option to reshove once the shorter stack shoves.
Here I have Ace King 10-6, double suited. Seems like a more than strong enough hand to open from the cutoff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this guy, Birdie, calls from the big blind, and with 31 hands on him, he's a 61-23. So he's probably going to be a weak, loose passive type player, maybe a little loose aggro.
Hmm. So yeah, I'm fine with your C bet here. I think that just this board misses so many people, and even though your Ace King's good a lot of the times that he folds, just take down the pot and protect.
Right, and then I decided to barrel the turn here because I
Yeah.
think a lot of times when he check calls the flop, I think he has like some sort of straight draw or like some overpair.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think it's a good turn to barrel just because, especially with how fast he called the flop. I think a lot of times he does have a hand like pocket eights, pocket nines, and the queen's a scare card. And you do have your like six outs if he does have a queen, or you have nine outs if he has just pocket nines and decides to call again. Um, could call twice with a straight draw, in which case like you still have the best hand, and that's not that terrible a situation. So I like the two barrel there.
What do you put him on once he check calls the turn? I know I would put him on something kind of weak still, like some sort of flush draw plus straight draw or flush draw plus like pair, something like that.
Yeah, I think that when check calls the flop, I put him on either like a gutter or open ender with some high cards in it. I doubt he has a three to like check call that fast, especially on the turn. Anyways, so once he calls the turn, I don't think he'd call the turn twice with pocket eights with nothing else. He'd call it with like diamonds. Could have like 8-8-5-4, 8-8 ace 5. Um, hands like that. He could certainly still have like a wrap, like ace 4-5 that he never wanted to get aggressive with. He could have hit a queen with like queen ace 5, um, or like even like queen 10-10. So I think he can have a lot of those different kinds of hands.
Right.
And are you thinking about barreling this river?
If he checks, I think I would. I don't know. I think it's top to bottom. I think I would probably bet here, um, because I mean I just feel like he was weak when he called the flop. He was weak when he called the turn, and I want to just push him off whatever he has. And I mean I have
Yeah.
Ace King high here, but he can have some like he can have like a pocket pair that he's gonna fold on the river, or he could have like a random deuce or something.
Yeah, my first thought was not to barrel because he either has like a draw that missed or um, like a pair plus. And it is a board where I feel like some people randomly like find a call with eights. But on second thought, I think that given that like he has can have like low pairs like fives and fours with his like ace 5-5, ace 4-4 with diamonds maybe, and he should fold eights more often than not. Like if he turns his hand up and has eights, this is a profitable bluff, I would think, against an unknown. So I think I would end up barreling. But he leads into you.
He leads into me, it looks like, for a half pot.
Yeah. So what are you putting him on here?
I mean, honestly, I'm still gonna go with the read that I had from the beginning of the hand. I just feel like he's weak here, and this just seems like a really odd way to play any sort of made hand here on the river, and it's just the type of bluff that you often see from fish and weaker players. So,
Right,
I mean,
check call, miss. Can't
right,
win unless I bet.
right. That's kind of what I put him on right here.
Yeah. So he bets like 270 and 530. We only have ace king high. So are you worried about him bluffing with the best hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some chance that he's bluffing with the best hand here. There's also like maybe some really small chance. I can't see him bet folding a three here, but if he somehow played a three like this, I guess there's like some small
I mean, yeah,
chance that
even
he
a deuce
folds.
beats you.
Right.
So if he has like ace deuce five, and turned it into a bluff, you'd be beat. Um, so I think I agree with you that if let's say we had like a pair of jacks here, I would call this all day. Given our pot odds and the way he played it, it seems really weak. Given that we have ace king high, I think it becomes a lot tougher.
Yeah, I agree. I would definitely just click call really fast here with jacks.
Mm-hmm. Alright, so it looks like you're considering a raise.
Yeah,
You do it.
I shove all in here, really not to get him off any sort of
Real hand.
hand that he's betting for value, just to make him fold whatever bluff he might have.
Right. Basically, this covers all the times that he's bluffing with the worst hand. Obviously, like it's better than folding when he has the worst hand, because you still win the pot. And if he does have a hand like eights or like deuce, ace deuce, 4-5 that turned into a bluff, you can presumably get him to fold that. The problem I have with a bet like this is that whereas like when he bets into you on the river, you're getting 3-1. Now you're giving yourself like just over 1-1, right? Or about 1-1.
That's about right.
So this has to work half the time. So I guess just a question of how confident are you that it'll work, or like that's likely enough. And given that, I don't think I mind it. I feel like this looks so much like air from him that this might work half the time. But I think you should consider other options. One, I still think calling isn't out of the question. Because I really don't think he would turn a hand like eights into a bluff here. I think if he had eights with diamonds, he would just check it down. Not always, but more often than not. And I do think he could turn a deuce into a bluff. He might not even know that he beats ace high with the deuce. But that said, is it really worth having to be right half the time as opposed to only having to be right a quarter of the time and just calling? And I'm not sure. You have thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess thinking about it some more, I would definitely feel like calling is probably better than shoving all in, just because we get such a better price on it, and I don't think he's gonna accidentally value tout us often enough to make shoving better than
Like I
calling
think
here.
it'll happen for sure sometimes, but I don't know if it'll happen enough that you give yourself a better odds of winning this way. And I guess another option is a min raise or smaller raise, which is ridiculously exploitable, but I think that's something else to consider.
Yeah.
But I guess he had the king queen 5-4, which actually makes sense. Check call twice fast, open ender, then paired plus open ender, and then interesting lead by him, I guess.
Right. Alright, so right here we have Queen 7-5-3, double suited from the big blind. UTG, who's a pretty loose aggressive player, min raises. Another loose player calls him, button calls, and I call the min raise.
Yeah, I think that's standard, just a min raise. A few people in the pot. None of them seem like especially good based on their stats. All right, so you flop the nuts. No redraw, pretty much. Um, and you check. Do you lead this flop ever with this hand? With first with this hand and then with any hand.
Um, I guess I definitely would consider leading this flop, having flopped the nuts, but I think there are probably two reasons why I ended up just checking. I feel like this is the type of flop that is going to get c-bet a good amount of the time, which I think will probably make checking better. And also, two of the players in the pot are very aggressive, which also makes it more likely that the flop is going to get bet.
Yeah, I think that this is a flop that gets c-bet a lot with air, but not a lot with like marginal hands. So I think there are a lot of ace, even ace deuce. We'll maybe check back in a three-way pot, um, and then like some aces with clubs or just random clubs. We'll check back. I think a lot of air will c-bet. Not a lot, but some. But I like to usually mix in a lead. I usually lead with this hand, um, just because I expect to get called by a lot. But I don't hate a check by any means. I just want to have the nuts some of the times when I lead, and this is a good board to lead as a bluff, kind of, and usually to two barrel because you get called by ace and three random cards, and then they fold a lot of turns. So if I had like a 4-5-6 with hearts here, I might lead this flop into everybody and then continue on a lot of turns. Anyway, so I want to balance that by having the nuts here sometimes. That said, you check, which I think's fine, and he pots, which is what we wanted. He's looks like a pretty aggressive player.
And I think I end up just pot check raising without thinking too much about slow playing here because he's really loose, really aggressive, and I mean, based on that, I guess I figured that he would probably stack pretty light here and would probably end up also calling the check raise too light.
Yeah, I mean, he is loose, but this like board texture, I'm not sure what kind of hands he can be calling check raises with. Like, if he has queens with clubs, is he gonna call or shove, or do you think he can fold that hand?
I don't think he folds that hand. I think he probably just calls.
Okay, and then like ace, queen, jack, deuce.
Wow, I guess that's kind of close. Maybe he calls and then folds. Maybe, I mean, he might be able to just fold that, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it sounds like against this guy it's not that bad. If he's going to be calling with a lot of those hands, against most people they're going to be bet folding here a ton of the time. And what's good about calling is that I think when you call, pot is what, like five, just over 500. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like 501, I
Yeah.
think.
And then you check the flop or check the turn, and if he has ace four, let's say the turn's a jack. If he has ace four, a lot of people just pot again, and then you can shove and already have 1,000 in the pot, shove for the rest of your stack, or let him pick up like ace jack, pick up two pair and pot call. So I think you get a lot more value that way. And yes, sometimes you get sucked out on, which is like a big fear of. I think that could be just like no limit to PLO people, or know that there are so many draws out there, and you have the nuts now. You might not have the nuts on the next street, but I think overall you make more money by waiting one street, letting him pick up two pair, or just like value town himself with his two pair, and putting your check raise then.
Right. I'm glad we picked out this hand because this definitely also points out a good situation to slow play here,
Right.
and definitely some of the reasons for doing it, especially considering we're out of position here.
Yeah, it's just like you're not getting played with that often, and like it's even more true if we assume this guy's a good player. If you put a good player in his spot, he's he's bet folding like most of his range here, unless he has you beat or like a set plus flush draw kind of thing.
All right, so right here I have Queen Jack 8-6 double suited, blind versus blind spot in position, and I think this is just a great spot to three bet.
Yeah, I mean it's double. It's not like an amazing hand, but double suited in position, you pretty much can't go wrong unless you're against a great player. He's going to be four betting a lot.
Right, so we have an incredibly dry flop right here with a pair, and I mean, I definitely feel like I should just bet like 110, 120, something like that.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree that bet's too big with your whole range. Like, there's no need to do that.
And I mean, this guy's a regular. I'm pretty sure he was on a few of my tables at the time. He's on two of these, I guess.
Hmm.
And I mean, just based on that, just instinctively, that just seems like an incredible spot for him to check raise bluff, considering how much of my range this flop is just going to end up missing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unlikely you have a 4 and 3 bet him pre-flop. Uh, there are only so many combos of aces and kings, which I assume you might call one with and then shut down. Um, he's giving himself a good price on the bluff, too. So there is reason to believe he's bluffing a good amount here. Um, so I guess the question is it often enough? And then what do we do about it? And I guess, we'll never know if it's often enough. But we can talk about what we do about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can re-raise him here. I mean, there's no reason to have to go all in here. I feel like if we just put in a small re-raise and he's bluffing, I can't really see him re-bluffing or
Yeah, I mean,
calling
honestly,
or trying to run something complicated like that.
if I'm in his shoes, or most people are in his shoes, and you click it back, I feel like they would think, okay, you have air, but I also do, and I'm not going to do anything about it because doing something about it means shoving with 0% equity sometimes. Um, so, yeah, I do think that clicking it back he's not going to bluff 4 bet, basically, almost ever, ever. So I think that's fine. I think floating is another option. Um, one benefit to floating is that I think he's going to play pretty face up on the turn. I don't really see him two-barreling that often, like firing the turn with air that often, and I also don't see him checking the turn to induce a bet from you from a float. That's a pretty advanced play. I have no reason to believe he's capable of it, I guess. So I guess the benefit to floating is it costs you 190, and then you don't have to put in any more before you get that information on the turn of him checking or betting. But a downside is he could, have an ace king XX and hit top pair and then decide that you're bluffing and check raise all in. Or you also could turn a draw and he could bet and then you talk yourself into shoving when maybe he has a boat. So I do think they're both pretty close.
Right. One question I guess I have is, I mean, the way I would play it out on the turn is if I pick up a flush draw or like an open ender or some sort of decent draw and he checks to me, I'm pretty much just gonna pot and call it off. So if I'm effectively just gonna shove. Whereas if I think the turn is like an offsuit deuce or like I guess not a queen because that pairs me, but like maybe like an offsuit king or something like that, and he checks, I'd probably just bet like 200.
Yeah, it's a bit unbalanced, but I mean, I would do the same. It also has to do with the board texture being different. A lot of the turns that give you a draw make the board more draw heavy, whereas like the offsuit kings, there's like no draw on the board that you have to protect from, hypothetically. So I think that's okay to be somewhat seemingly unbalanced in that spot and be betting small when you don't pick up a draw and betting and shoving when you do pick up a draw. Especially because I guess it'll almost just be, you can just shove basically, right? There'll be enough in the pot that you can shove. So yeah, I would agree with that. So I think the floating and clicking it back are both fine. So you click it back. And he pretty quickly shoves. And you decide not to call to go for your back doors.
And that's going to be it for episode 2 of PLO. Hope you guys enjoyed. Tune in 2 weeks for episode 3.